Hi, honey.
Hey.
Hey. Are you sitting in front of your computer?
Yeah, why?
I was wondering if you were looking at me. I'm eating a sandwich. I was hungry.
Well, you gotta eat.
Well, yeah.
What kind of sandwich is it?
Bologna. I didn't buy any ham or anything like that, so.
Aw, okay.
So your parents are gone now?
Yeah, they left at 4.
Good. Are you ready for me?
Yes.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
How you did?
Yes.
Me too.
Cool.
Cool. I was going to tell you something when I was on the phone, and I can't remember what it was now.
Aww. Think really, really hard.
I'm trying, believe me.
Hello everybody, welcome back. It's 2026. Woo! I hope all of you had a great Christmas and New Year, and let's look forward to this one. To be fair, I always have a better year when it's an even number, so I'm really hoping so. I wanted to jump in today and talk about a documentary that I recently discovered. It came out last year and it's called Predators. So this documentary film was originally released in January 2025 at the Sundance Film Festival. Then it was made available for streaming in September 2025. I watched it on Paramount Plus. That's the only place I could find it. It was recommended to me alongside a list of other things, and that one jumped out to me because of what it was about. So this film explores the old TV show To Catch a Predator, and then kind of how that has inspired amateur hunters to have their own shows and channels and videos and things like that in this kind of new age of YouTube and all of the social media and things like that. But we'll go back to the start. So it's at the kind of To Catch a Predator era. For those of you who are not aware of this old TV show, it is called To Catch a Predator. It was Dateline NBC's program, and it was hosted by journalist Chris Hansen. It premiered in 2004 and then November 2004 and then ended in December 2007. Now, I actually did watch this when it was on TV. I'm not sure what channel because we didn't have Dateline in the UK, but I remember watching it with my sister every week. We would get together and watch this show, like as it was on, and I watched reruns after that, but I remember watching it as it was on, and we would actually look forward to the next week, to the next episode. The basic synopsis of this show, it is a reality show. It's real. It is kind of a hidden camera situation. You would have, it would be a sting operation, basically, to catch out predators. They would be chatting online and then eventually arrange a meet at a house, which was obviously had hidden cameras up. They would have the decoy there. The men would come to the house, and then soon after arriving, Chris Hansen would walk out and confront them in a non-aggressive way. He would simply talk. He would always say, you know, you're free to leave, but come and have a chat. Let's talk about this. Why are you here? You know, what did you think was going to happen? What did, you know, try and kind of figure out what they're there for, and kind of, I guess, figure out where their mindset is in the fact that they thought it was okay to come and obviously meet an underage person. They had a boy decoy as well as the girl decoys. And yeah, it was all about finding child predators online and then luring them to the house. It would often have an arrest in it because there would be police there ready outside the house. So as soon as they would walk out the house, they would be arrested and then subsequently go through the legal proceedings and things. And yeah, we loved that show. My sister and I, we loved it. And it was a shock when it ended. And I think that we just was like, why is this finished? And it wasn't until recently that I discovered kind of everything that went down with that episode, which we'll get into, and the controversy that surrounded this show as well. We wasn't really aware at the time, and how many people were not kind of okay with it, and then how many people were really for it, you know. And we'll get to that as well. But this documentary, Predators, it shows kind of raw footage that was never really aired, or raw footage obviously not edited either, to show you kind of how the show would play their narrative and kind of the other bits that weren't seen. And the reason they did this, and throughout the whole kind of documentary really, they're trying to get you to see a perspective where you can sympathize with the predator. And I mean, to be honest, watching that raw footage, it still doesn't change the fact of what they did or what they were planning to do. And the thing is, and I'm going to continue to say this throughout because it's the same kind of summary to every point they try and make in this documentary, is that, I mean, back then in 2004, yeah, we had computers, we had internet, but it wasn't like it is now. I mean, it's even more accessible now. There's so many different platforms that predators can use. There's so many, you know, there's so much more connectivity, not just to a victim, but for the predators to engage with each other. It's just all a lot more accessible. And if you think about these guys back then, it's even worse now in a way, because more people are exposed to things and people see how easy it is to get to a victim, because most of the time that's all children do, is be on their phones, on their social media, on the even Xbox, PlayStation, gaming accounts, all of that. And the main focus for the predator is to get to the victim and assault the victim. So why should I feel sympathy for the fact that they're now being arrested for their crime or potential crime? They were there to do something dreadful. And even the correspondence before that, they don't just pick up a random person and take them to the house straight away. There is a relationship that builds up. For the predator, obviously it's a decoy in this case, speaking to them, but they don't know that. They think it's an actual 12-year-old child or whatever. And they're saying disgusting, vulgar things. That is a crime in itself. So this grown adult knows what they're doing is wrong. They were planning to go to a house to meet a 12-year-old child or whatever to carry out some horrific abuse. So, no, actually, showing me them crying in an interrogation because they've been caught does not make me feel sorry for them whatsoever. They should face the consequences of what they've done. And yeah, it's going to be on TV. That is unfortunate. But this TV show stopped people. Got them, you know, arrested, got them prosecuted, and then will forever be on the offenders register. Because you may have criticism because it's a sting operation, honey trap, and things like that. But imagine if it wasn't. Imagine if it wasn't a decoy. The outcome would have been worse for the victim, obviously. And then the predator perhaps some cases not, but most cases would have been caught eventually. But then you would have had a victim who has gone through this horrific ordeal and will have to deal with that trauma forever. So I'm all for the sting operations. I'm all for honey trapping these disgusting monsters without them harming an innocent child. That's just my opinion. So, no, that raw footage did nothing for me. It really didn't. I didn't care about them whatsoever. Let's go to the episode in particular that really caused a lot of controversy for the To Catch a Predator and for Chris Hansen himself. Now, the episode, okay, so this happened on November 6, 2006, okay? They had started to engage with a predator who was someone of quite significance. They were the assistant district attorney in Kaufman County. His name was Bill Conrad, okay? He was the predator. He was exchanging disgusting messages and images to what he thought was a 13-year-old boy. He was on the phone arranging to meet up with said boy, obviously the decoy, and they set up this meeting and he did not arrive. So they were kind of thinking about what they should do, because obviously they had everything for this episode aside from the fact that the predator did not arrive. What they decided to do next was something that they had never done before. They decided to go to this man's house. They knew where he lived, so they went to his house. The whole team from the camera crew and everybody, Chris Hansen was there with officers to kind of move the sting operation and sting him right there in his home. And they did that. With this kind of siege, the police eventually entered, and there were a lot of police there, like 20 police officers. The police, eventually they got SWAT and everybody, they entered. They walked into the part where this man was kind of hiding. He had a gun. He turned to the officers and said, "I'm not going to hurt you," and then proceeded to shoot himself in the head. He did die from his injuries. And I will say, the only point in this documentary where I kind of got annoyed with the police officers and things like that was at this moment, because you kind of see all of this stuff playing out, and then you see the officer come over who is talking to Chris Hansen, talking to the camera, and he's trying to find out, Chris Hansen is trying to find out kind of what's happened, and this officer is explaining what's happened in kind of like a way where you could tell she really didn't give a shit. Like, genuinely. She was like, yeah, he shot himself. You know, almost in a weird, jokey way, if that makes sense. I mean, that was my impression. It was almost like it really was like, oh yeah, he shot himself. He had a gun. I don't know if he's dead. Like, we're gonna, send him off to hospital. We'll find out. It was really like, I really don't give a fuck. And I thought that was quite unfair. Even though we know so far what this person has done in regards to communicating and sending explicit messages and images to what they thought was a 13-year-old boy, which is disgusting and despicable. But he was yet to be arrested and charged with his crimes. And I suppose he didn't show up to the Sting House. So was that because he was like, oh man, actually, this is not right. This is like, I'm a fucking wrong and I need to sort my life out? Or was it because he was like, this seems a bit dodgy? Is there going to be police there? You know, did he figure out that it was to catch a predator? I don't know. But the fact is he didn't show up to the house. So even though he was still playing out some weird perverted fantasy through text and imaging, and the fact that he at that time thought he was talking with a child is disgusting enough, but he didn't go to the house. He didn't go to physically assault this child. So there is a difference there. I mean, don't get me wrong. Any kind of sexual communication with a child is absolutely wrong, okay? And they should be arrested and they should be charged with that and they should, you know. But the speaking and the act are two different things. They, of course, both can bring a lot of trauma and psychological distress to any child, but one trumps the other, in which case they should be two separate crimes, because one is more significant than the other in a way, even though it's all disgusting. So perhaps they should have, as a TV show, cut their losses, given the police this person's information, let them deal with it in their own time, in their own way, under their own investigation, and move on and do another episode. Perhaps they should have done that as a TV show, but then I know that they were a popular show, and I don't think they expected someone to kill themselves, but I'm sure they expected some sort of spectacle, in which case would have pulled ratings. So there is a lot of blurred lines there in the point of what was right and what was wrong. And this woman's attitude, police officer's attitude, was a bit shit after someone's just killed themselves. You know, and he was someone of significance, so of course being exposed for this kind of crime is life-ending in a way, one way or the other. So he needed to escape instead of facing the consequences. It was very controversial, and even as I think about it, it's controversial. And as I'm saying it now, because it's still ruminating in my head. And I didn't know that they actually aired that episode, because they did air it. I know that it was eventually pulled, but I don't remember seeing it. So maybe it didn't make its way here by the time we got it, because we were probably delayed a few months anyway from original programming. But I don't remember seeing it. And yeah, they did air it. So that was... I don't think they should have aired it, to be honest. I really don't. But then they wanted the audience. And it did get a lot of ratings, that one did. It did get backlash. There were protests in the area, in the town. The local residents blamed the team for bringing sex offenders to their area. And they hit back with, people that are already here, we're just exposing them and trying to, you know, get them prosecuted and arrested for their crimes. And then it got a bit worse from there. Bill Conrad's family sued Dateline NBC for $105 million for what happened, and subsequently airing what happened and everything like that. They did settle out of court, so, you know, they would have definitely got a hefty sum. And they did continue to release, I think, 6 episodes after that. But eventually the show ended. They did have reruns going for quite some time. And Chris Hansen said at the time that the reason the show ended is because it ran its course. Whether or not that's true, well, who knows? The events after that were quite bad because the prosecutor refused to kind of try a number of cases from the To Catch a Predator show. So the predators that they caught, they weren't tried for their crimes because they said that there was not enough evidence, and there was some cases where the decoys were not in that state at the time of this communication, in which case they can't try it in that state. It's all very confusing to me when it comes to the different states and all of that. I just think a crime's a crime. Like, just who cares where it happened as long as it's in the same country. But there are obviously, that's the way they work. But to say that there was not enough evidence, and another point was that before being called by To Catch a Predator, the officers hadn't investigated before the arrest on the sting night. But they're called to arrest after the investigation has been done through the To Catch a Predator team. They have all of the information to hand to you. So how can you look through that and say that there's not enough evidence? I think that when this unfortunate incident with the Assistant District Attorney Bill Conrad, and kind of opinions were changing on the show, they decided perhaps that they weren't going to back it anymore. Officers came out and said that they were instructed by the people on the crew what they should do, what they should say in interrogation, and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't change the fact that there is still a criminal there. Like, they don't show you everything that is said throughout these communications on the show, but they show you enough, which is pretty sick. They show you, they give you phone calls to listen to, which is pretty sick. So imagine the things they're not showing, that they can't show because it's too sick to show on TV, and then to let them just carry on in the world. But that's what happened. That's what happened back then, and the show ended. And that brings us up to the recent times, the modern age of internet branded predator hunters. Let's get into it. I have seen over the years these videos on YouTube, on Reels and things like that, of people creating their own sting operations to catch out online predators. And in some cases, it goes a bit too far. They are confronted with aggression, often assaulted in some way, and that's not the way to do it. And I know that you can have some feelings towards these people as you're meeting them, because you know all the facts. You've been doing the chats and whatnot with them, so it will manifest these feelings towards the person you're about to meet that can cause you to lash out when you see them. And that's why people shouldn't do it. You should have this ability to confront them as calmly, as professionally as you can, instead of making this whole mess 100 times worse. Because as soon as you lay your hands on someone like that, then the chances of them getting arrested and prosecuted for their crime goes down, because it's turned into some fiasco, whereas you cannot use that evidence because you have assaulted them. And there's so many kind of legal tape around a lot of these things, which makes it really difficult when you try and amateur detective your way through. All these people just want, clicks and likes and subscribers and things, for monetization purposes, instead of actually wanting to get justice. So they create the most chaotic content they can because it draws in viewers. In this documentary, we saw examples of this. And then it took us to an online creator who says that he kind of wanted to create this kind of show again, To Catch a Predator, in his own way, and kind of mimic Chris Hansen's way of doing things, because he was always very calm, even down to the way he dresses, like in a nice sharp suit, sit down, talk with these people, get their side of the story, get where their head's at, try and get some answers, and then kind of lead them on to the police. Although I didn't really like him very much, because I thought, that's pretty cool that you do this. But then he said that, well, actually, sometimes he just pretends the police are there in his videos so that they don't get banned from YouTube, by having people dress up as police officers or putting in some blue lights in the background to make it look like the police are actually there, in order to get likes and views. And he basically said that's all he really cares about. So, but at least he's not going in an aggressive kind of way. And he uses a woman to be the decoy. She is, she's the one that does all the phone calls and stuff. And she does this, like, that's her full-time job. And then when they come to the room, they look at her because she doesn't look like a child. So as soon as they walk in, they know that something's wrong. And that's when they kind of go out with the cameras and confront their predators that they found. And there's this one instance where they've got this guy and they're talking to him, and he breaks down and he's like, oh, I need help. Is there some way that, like, you can help me or refer me to somewhere that I can get help? And they have this decoy woman sat down watching this footage again to kind of get her to feel some sort of sympathy. And eventually she does a little bit, I think. At first she's very, I don't care about these people. She was a victim of abuse as a child. So she has her opinions, and so she should. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions, and you shouldn't be forced to feel sympathy for someone who mimics the exact people that you had to break free from, who have given you, these exact people that have given you that trauma. But eventually she does kind of feel a bit sorry for him. But I always find it funny that when these people are confronted, the predators, I need help. I know, like, what I'm doing is not right, but I need help. You didn't go there that day to get help. You went there that day to rape a child. So you want help now that you're caught? That's what the main thing for me is. Whereas they say, oh, well, these people can't help it. It's a compulsion that they have and they can't help it. Okay, so let's look at this from a psychological point, because in the world of psychology, which I am quite adept in, they have this area for people called MAPS. Okay? Now, MAPS stands for Minor Attracted Persons. And they have a whole kind of space where people can get therapy, get help for their minor attractions, you know. And there are a few people in the psychology world pushing this as a kind of sexual attraction, like in a way that you are born with this compulsion and it should be treated as such. Okay, now I'm not saying everybody, there is a small group. Okay, I've done a lot of studies on this. Like when I was doing my studies in psychology, my coursework and everything like that, there was a huge section dedicated to this. So I'll try and explain it in a basic way without making it sound too kind of serious. Okay, so there is a small group of people in the kind of psychology world who push this as an attraction, a sexual orientation, I should say. They're basically saying it is the same thing as whether or not you are born with an attraction to men, women, whether you're heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual. They're saying it's in that category. Okay? So then, for example, if you are born with this compulsion, I'm not saying you're not. I think that in many cases, you have to have this inside of you. It is a predilection, okay? And for that to exist, you are born with that kind of brain chemistry. And it evolves and grows as you evolve and grow. And I can see how that would work and how that would make sense. But as you evolve and you grow, if you are a stable human being and you are raised in a stable lifestyle where you have access to education, where you have access to stable parents, stable teachers, stable surroundings where you learn right from wrong, you would learn very quickly what is right and what is wrong. And if what you are thinking in the sense of a sexual fantasy and you realize, whoa, that's not right, because this is what I'm thinking about what I want to do, but I've always been told that that is wrong and that is against the law, because you're thinking about having sex with a child and you know that that is not right because you have been raised on this moral ground. Then at that point, as soon as you start to even have the inkling that that is where your brain is going, at that point you go, okay, I need to seek therapy because what I'm thinking is not right. And there are people that have done that. There are people who start to have these thoughts and feelings towards children and then seek therapy before they do anything else because they know it's wrong. So why wait until you are caught to say you need help? That is the thing. So when they break down and they start crying and say, you know, oh, I need help and I need therapy, because there is access out there. You can Google it. Go on Google, say, you know, therapy for this, and you will find somewhere and you will find someone who will be able to help you with your thoughts. And I can't even imagine how that must feel if you are a well-adjusted human being, you are trying to do the best in your life, and then suddenly or slowly these feelings and these thoughts kind of manifest inside of you, and it must be awful. And you must think, oh my God, and the fear and the things of what you could potentially do would be overwhelming. But the fact is, there are people that seek help. First point of call. Because there is help available. There is a whole designated part of psychology for that. So when they break down and cry after they've been caught, whether it be by a sting operation or whether it be by the police after they've done horrendous abuse. And I think, well, you knew that from the start. You knew that from the off. So why should I care that you're crying? Because your life is over. Because people are going to find out what you are. You didn't have to become that. You could have stopped it before. And it would be, like I said, horrible and nerve-wracking and horrendous to have to seek out that therapy yourself. But a good person would do that. For then you are not a good person if you do not do that. If you go out to commit a crime. Because in this case, on this documentary, with that man crying in the Sting motel room or wherever they are with that YouTube guy, like I said before with the To Catch a Predator stings, they weren't going there to seek help and therapy. They were going there to rape a child. It's pretty simple, right? So no, I don't have sympathy. And that's my opinion. There is help out there. They can go and find it. After we finish with the internet detectives, we go back to kind of what Chris Hansen is doing now. So since To Catch a Predator, Chris Hansen has done numerous kind of shows, all relating to the kind of To Catch a Predator theme. He had, Sit Down with Chris Hansen, Hansen versus Predator, and he's now under the True Blue kind of channel, has this show that premiered in December 2021 called Takedown with Chris Hansen. And I do watch that. I do watch that one. And it's a similar theme, talking to predators, sting operation, and kind of arrest and prosecution type thing. And that was kind of going smooth and steady. And then we hit a episode of controversy. Now, this particular episode, I didn't see, and it has since been taken down. And I kind of wish I could watch it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So if anyone actually has seen it or can find it somewhere, then that would be great. But I couldn't find it to watch it, but they talk about it at length in this documentary. They talk about a particular predator that they find called Hunter. That's the only name that we're given. And in the show, basically, Chris Hansen has done this episode, and then he's then talking with his kind of the guy who runs the True Blue channel, I think he is. And they are discussing whether or not to air this episode. The reason being is that Hunter is 18. Okay? And the person he was going to see, who he thought he was going to see that day, was a 15-year-old boy. Now, in America, again, I sometimes don't understand all the different states and their laws, but in some states that's not illegal, and in some states it is. And it happens to be that the state that they were in, it was illegal. Now, of course that should be illegal. Where I'm from, that's illegal, and I actually double checked that was illegal before people say actually it's legal. No, if you're 18 you cannot go out with someone or have a sexual relationship with someone who is 15. Okay? Where I'm from, the legal age of consent is 16. Okay? So it's kind of younger than a lot of places in America. In America, most states, it's 18, the legal age of consent. Where I'm from, it's 16. But even still, where our age of consent is lower, and I looked it up, it is still against the law. So when you have someone 16 plus going out with someone below 16, you can have a 2-year kind of leeway. Okay, so say you have someone who is 16 going out with someone that is 14, that is legal. If you had someone who was 17 going out with someone that was 15, that is legal. Okay, but someone who is 18 going out with someone who is 15, illegal. It may not seem like a huge difference because what is a year between what is legal and what is illegal, but it's still illegal. And from what I understand from this episode, or from the documentary when they talk about this particular case in this particular episode, is that he's not a fresh 18-year-old. He is well into his 18th year, which I'm assuming is that he is close to 19. Okay? And even though it doesn't seem like a huge age gap, and in which case, if they were older with that, 3-year age gap is not a huge deal. But being 15 and being 18, almost 19, are two very different things and two very different experiences. You know, even though your mind develops up until you're 25, your mind as a 15-year-old and your mind as an 18-year-old is very different, even in that short amount of time. Psychologically, it is different. But in any case, they decided to air the episode because, from a legal standpoint, the person was still committing a crime. And then in the episode, in the documentary, you're then taken to this hunter's mother speaking about what happened, and about she was, saying about when she was informed that her son was arrested. And then she says about when she heard the episode was going to be aired, in which she started to really slate Chris Hansen, saying, I don't believe he would stoop so low to air that. And I thought, well, why? It's always unfortunate when a predator is caught in this way and it's going to be on blast. But, even though it's your child, and I understand that is, awful for this to happen, but he was still there to commit a crime. I don't know how many times I need to say it. And they have, evidence before that. They have these chat logs and, I don't know how long they were chatting or whatever before the meetup was set. I haven't seen the actual episode. I'm just going by what I learned from what I saw on the documentary. But, he was there to commit a sexual offence on a child. You have to take some responsibility for that. Not the mother, she didn't. You can't blame the parents always for the child's actions, but to take it out on the TV show, or the host of the TV show, is pretty petty in a way. Of course, he's there to make a TV show, but he is doing justice by catching these predators. And this hunter was convicted and arrested and given a sentence. He wasn't put in prison. He was banned from being around anyone under the age of 18, and so he should. And the mum was saying, he couldn't even be left alone with his 16-year-old brother. No! This person was about to commit a sexual offence on a child, a 15-year-old. Now, I'm not saying he was going to go and rape his own brother, but who knows? The world is a crazy place and people do disgusting things. Would you want to take that chance? You know, I'm not saying he would have done that. But there are laws in place for a reason and precautions in place for a reason. If the evidence showed that these rules should be in place for that particular person, then they are in place for a reason. They have evidence to support their findings and their rulings. And then you hear him go off crying. You don't see him, but you hear crying. And it's kind of like when she's discussing that he couldn't go back to school. And, you know, he was, you know, life is ruined because of Chris Hansen. No, his life is ruined because of himself. He did this to himself. Yeah, whether it was a stupid mistake to make as an 18-year-old, it's still your mistake. And you have to pay for those consequences. Don't do it. That really riled me up when she was chatting shit. It really was. And sometimes parents, you know, it's hard because they don't want to see the truth. And I can see that. But if one of my children did something like that, no matter how hard it would be as a parent, you know, they need to face the consequences of what they've done. And I will stand by that. Like I said, that episode was eventually pulled. There was some sort of deal made and they had to pull the episode after that. But the creator of this documentary, David, he is sat down with Chris Hansen and speaks to him directly about this on this documentary. And he says, you know, even though the episode's pulled, like, you Google this guy's name and it's everywhere. People can find this information. And Chris Hansen said, yeah, well, for now they can, you know. I don't know why they try and blame him, okay? I don't know why they try and blame Chris Hansen for what happens to these predators after they've committed these crimes. It's not his fault. He didn't force people to commit the crimes. He is stitching them up. Yeah. But I fully believe, and I stand by it, that he is doing the world a favour. His whole career is primarily focused on catching predators and saving children. Does he profit off it? Yes, that's his job. He profits off it. But he's still doing the job and still doing the work and still saving children. In my opinion. In this interview that Chris Hansen has at the end with the documentary filmmaker David, he talks about in his opinion, there are 3 different types of predators. First being the hardcore predators, the ones that will offend regardless of access, whether they have access or not to the internet. So these are the types of people that kind of don't see what they're doing as wrong, because in their compulsion and their belief that they can have these types of relationships with young people and children is so strong that they believe that it's reciprocated, that kind of love, you know. And obviously it's not, because children cannot give consent, nor can they understand what it means to be in that kind of relationship. And they are probably some of the most dangerous child predators, because they will offend, and they will continue to offend no matter what kind of intervention is given. The second type of predator Chris Hansen describes is the type of predator that preys on children because they may be in some ways, you know, socially awkward. They may not get the affection that they require from their own peer group. So in turn, they choose to prey on children to get that affection, because children are easier to get that kind of love and devotion from. And then the third type of predator Chris Hansen discusses is the ones that only offend because of early access or easy access to the internet. He describes these as younger people who are in their teens, early 20s, and they just have that access that gives them this kind of feeding ground in a way. And I can agree with that to an extent. I think that early exposure to certain things can definitely mess up your brain chemistry in that way. But I also think that in order to offend in that way, you have to have that kind of predilection inside of you already. I don't think that you can just create an abuser. I really don't. I think that it needs to be deep within, and sometimes possibly, even if it's only a very, very small sense, can go undetected or can go unrecognized to oneself for a long period of time, unless it's ignited by seeing something or being exposed to something. There is, they always talk about when you see on documentaries and you see things and, this child predator was once abused as a child, and a lot of people make that link that if you're abused, then you will abuse in the future, and that is not true at all. It just means that that person had that within themselves already. It was just ignited because they went through something traumatic as a child, or at any point really. But because there are so many people who did go through horrific abuse as a child and then go on not to abuse and go on to actually advocate for, the protection of children rather than the other way around. It just means that, and this is just what I believe in what I've learned. I just mean that you can't just create a child abuser. And if what these MAP people are saying, MAP advocates are saying is right, is that it is a sexual orientation that you are born with, then that supports my theory that you can only become a predator if you have that within yourself, no matter what you see or what you're exposed to or what you go through. You either are or you're not. David poses the question to Chris Hansen when Chris Hansen states the three different types of predators that he suggests. And David says to Chris, well, they all get the same consequence, regardless of how deep the offence, first offence, things like that. And Chris Hansen says, yes, well, so they should, and I completely agree with that. Completely agree with that. And I want to say that Chris Hansen has spent, 30 years at least with this goal in mind, and it's to stop child predators. Whether or not you think the TV show is a spectacle, of course it is. What reality TV show isn't? But at least this one, I think, gives us that gratification of having these predators caught and arrested and hopefully given a proper jail term. I always find that, at least where I'm from in the UK, that child offences in court, child sexual offences in court, do not get taken as seriously as they should. Quite literally, the quite literally the charges for kind of, let's say, viewing child pornographic material, and they have different categories for that, and usually it's a wide range that people view, and obviously I'm not going to go into what is in these images or these videos, but if you can imagine the most horrific, worst thing that you can possibly think of to do to a child, and then times that by 10, because it is horrendous. It is the most disturbing and the most disgusting things that anyone can ever create. And these people are viewing it, they are sharing it with their paedophile networks, and they are using that as their own pornographic material for their own sexual pleasure and gratification. And they have the different categories based on severity of the crime and ages of the children. So you can have teenager, child, and baby. It is horrible. So even viewing that should be a serious offense. Sharing it should be even more serious. Making it, that's, hang them. When you get arrested for something like that, for the material, for viewing it, sharing it, downloading it, whatever, you're probably looking at a suspended sentence. No prison time. They come, they take away your electronic devices, tell you you're not allowed to go on the internet, tell you you're not allowed to talk to certain people, not even like tagged to their house. Like, they can still go out and about, most of them. Yeah, they're not allowed within certain radius of wherever. And they will get a probation officer come and visit them. Never, quite literally. They're never checked up on. It's ridiculous. And then for actual physical offences to a child, so raping a child, depending on the age, maybe a year or two in prison. And I'm not exaggerating that. You have to do something pretty horrendous, probably murder them at the end to actually get a proper sentence, if then. To summarise, I think that the documentary was really quite good. I recommend to watch it if you haven't yet. I don't agree with the agenda they tried to push, that we should kind of try and sympathise with these people. That is my view. You guys may watch it and feel completely different, and that's absolutely fine. It's just, in my opinion, in my experience, I can't relate to that side of it. I can't sympathise for someone who hasn't tried to help themselves. Because even when you watch it and you see them crying and stuff afterwards, begging for help, you just always remember that what did they go there for that day? Because they were going to assault a child, and they had been talking about it. Think about the things that they were saying, the transcripts, everything. Do I think that To Catch a Predator was bad? Do I think that it is a stain on television? Absolutely not. I don't think so. It was controversial for sure, but compared to a lot of the stuff that's on TV now, no, I don't think it was a stain on television. I think that it was a good show. I definitely think we've evolved from that kind of TV show, in a way. I don't know if it would be as popular if it was on TV now. Maybe it would be. Maybe there's an audience for that. There clearly is for these internet detectives, right? These internet hunters, I should say. There's an audience there, but do they watch that because they like to see the chaos that occurs afterwards? Is that what the audience want? I don't know. I liked To Catch a Predator. I really liked Chris Hansen, and I still watch his stuff. So I don't see what he is doing as a bad thing. It does raise a lot of questions. I just think that in society, we need people standing up for the innocent, and that is the children. There are predators hiding absolutely everywhere. You cannot tell them apart because everyone is so different. Everyone lives different lives, and people can be so secretive with their lives that you really, when you think about it, could be difficult to trust anyone, and you just have to try and kind of hope they don't turn out to be a wrong one. Protect the children is really the answer. But do watch the documentary if you haven't. It is really quite good. It's made very, very well. And it gives you more of an insight. I just kind of went over a brief thing and the bits that I wanted to point out and talk about. But there is a lot more substance there. There is interviews with the original decoys from the OG show, and that's interesting, and how they kind of came about and how they felt about everything that was going on at the time. And they were in it, so they were doing it, so their opinion does matter in a way. It's good, and that's where I'm going to leave it. So take care out there, everyone. Let's have a great 2026. Peace and love. P.S. guys, I'm back. It's actually quite ironic, but as I was sat here just editing the video here, and a news story flashed up on my phone that just really adds to my little summary there about prison sentences being absolutely ridiculously lenient for child offences, child predators. And I'm going to link in the little clip that I just saw at the end of this video here, so you can see what I've just seen, and it really will just tie up this video nicely, I think. It's absolutely crazy. Well, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, subscribe, comment. I will write back when I have time. Sometimes I get distracted and then I'll see all these comments and have to try and reply to all of them, but please do, yeah, let me know what you think about this one. Bye, guys.
Former Premier League referee David Coote has avoided jail as he was sentenced for possessing a child abuse video. The footage was Category A, the most serious kind, and was found by police on one of his devices. Nottingham Crown Court heard it showed a 15-year-old boy in school uniform. He was sentenced to 9 months in prison, suspended for 2 years. Coote was charged in February last year with making an indecent image of a child and pleaded guilty in October.